Yeah, we're recording.
Good evening and welcome to the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny meeting. It's now 7 PM and I'd like to start this meeting. I'm Councillor Sarah Muldowney and I'm the chair of this meeting. As this meeting is being held again in the Beehive chamber, there's a time limit for the venue. If the items on the agenda are not this meeting, Children's Services. If this happens, we'll adjourn once the report has been concluded. I would like to remind everyone present that this is being recorded for publication on the site. Officers attending virtually on Microsoft Teams, please use the raise your hand option when you wish to speak, and Lucy note this down. So joining tonight, Councillor Salmons and Cassie as ward councillors for Tilbury, and after the committee has debated. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have received no apologies. Lucy, you said you'd received apologies.
Councillor Watson, we've got Councillor Sub and Sally Kawad.
Okay, item 2, minutes. I move that the minutes of the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny held on the 11th of November 2021, 1st of December 2020 be approved as a record. Any comment? Item 3, I've not agreed to any items of urgent business. Move on to item 4. Does anyone have any declarations of Item 5 is a verbal update from the youth. The Youth Cabinet also provided a written update which was circulated. That's substitute. When Lisa comes. Okay, Lucy, are you speaking for Youth Cabinet tonight, or do we have any members of the Youth Cabinet online?
I have Lauren with me. I think you can see her right here, so I'm going to let her speak.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm the chair of the Youth Cabinet. So we have been running some key topics within our cabinet this year. One of them being Make Your Mark. This is where the British Youth Council is carrying out a campaign, and the Youth Cabinet is helping promote the ballots to get them around young people, to make sure young people have a say on key topics such as COVID-19 recovery and mental health within Thurrock. We've also been carrying out campaigns. Last year we did the mental health and plastic pollution, and we're carrying on our work with that. And we're carrying on with the campaigns. Also with the mental health, we're working in partnerships with UMS to create a survey. This will be for young people to complete, so we can get more information on how we can go forward with those campaigns and make sure they're the most effective as they are. We're also doing our work with Essex Police, being the Speak Up, Speak Out and Speak Big. Obviously this is partnership with the Essex Police and with the Community Safety and Crime Lead. We want to make a short presentation, like a video clip around certain crime topics, to make it more engaging to young people so they are aware of crimes. Around like their social media and stuff, we feedback that it wasn't very appealing to young people, and that young people don't really use like Facebook, that they promote their Essex Police crime facts on there. We're also doing a Farc youth conference. Due to COVID-19, we are doing a bit of a road show, so we normally get all the schools in one big hall, but because of COVID we'll be going to the schools and being running projects. We've already picked some of the topics such as disability awareness, discrimination, opportunities in Thurrock, where we can debate, educate and get reviews from young people. We're also doing our hate crime leaflet. So we've been asked to work with a partnership from a member of Essex Police, and we'll be creating a leaflet for 9 to 13-year-olds. This will be linking in with the hate crime officer, who does like all the statistics for Thurrock, and basing our work off that as well. Lastly, we've been doing the 11-19 strategy meeting, where myself, the chair and vice chair, work with the head teachers around Thurrock and get feedback, and it helps us go towards our projects and topics within the youth cabinet.
Great, thank you, Lauren. That was a really good summary of what you've been doing. And as usual, Youth Cabinet are very busy. It's always good to have you here to talk about what you're up to.
Thank you for having us.
Michelle.
Just to say, sort of, Lucy, I'm interested in the work you're doing with Essex Police and how the youth cabinet are thinking that's going to be rolled out and how it's linking into the work with the schools. So I guess I'm trying to look at how it's linking up, Lucy. That's the question, yeah?
Sorry, Michelle, can you just repeat that? It's very laggy. I'm really sorry.
So what I was talking about, Lucy, was the work with Essex Police.
Yeah.
And how that's linking up to the work with schools.
So we're basically going to be working with the schools with Make Your Mark anyway. So we've got some representatives from Youth Cabinet anyway with each school. So that's how we're going to promote it through schools as well. So each member from Youth Cabinet in the schools are going to be doing Make Your Mark, and as well as with the poster. So that's how we're going to go into the schools, because we're trying our hardest to get recruitment up and running. I think we've got a few more schools to target, but that's our aim until the next meeting. So hopefully we'll get a full house basically with every school will have a youth cabinet member in each school. That's our target, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say on Make Your Mark, obviously you said the turnout's been low in Thurrock for the past couple of years, and that's been because of COVID and not being able to get together, etc. So I just wondered, what kind of ideas have you had for improving engagement with Make Your Mark this year?
So some of it we've done via links, so we know that young people maybe can't really be bothered to sign a piece of paper, so we've done it all through links. So we as the youth cabinet's spreading it on social media, because that's what kids use these days, and we've got lots of people signing online. We also are doing group votes, so we're taking them into our classrooms and handing out to our schools to complete in the classrooms, and like so we can tally them up, so you get to do a whole class kind of vote or just hand out a ballot. So we've got kind of 3 ways of doing it, which will help hopefully get the more people signing them.
Fantastic, that sounds great. Maybe we could learn a bit at the council about how to engage people for some of our consultations. That's really good. So well done. I'm sorry that some things have been delayed, obviously because of the lack of resource at the council with the police, but you feel like it sounds like things are now back on track and moving forward. Right. Well, I wish you all the best with that work, and thank you very much. You're very welcome to stay in the meeting tonight, but if you wish to go and do other things, then that's fine as well. So completely up to you.
We'll have to apologise because we're actually in a monthly meeting, so we're going to have to go for this one.
Okay, not to worry.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Lucy, just to say that the substitute member didn't receive the written report. That's the Kent didn't receive the written report from Children's Services. It wasn't circulated. But if it can be, that would be good. Okay, so item 6, report from Thurrock Local Safeguarding Children's Partnerships. This is on page 27 to 56 of the agenda. Can I ask Priscilla, Bruce and Anne to present the report?
Chair. So the report that you have in front of you is an update on the work of the Lscps for the Local Safeguarding Children's Partnership. So I'll cover the update in terms of the work that we've been doing since our last meeting. and the ongoing progress across all the action plans which you have as an in your budget. So in terms of the Lscp priorities, we've got current priorities that we're working to an end at the end of March this year, and those current priorities are neglect, performance monitoring, policies and procedures, participation and engagement, learning and improve violence and vulnerability. So they come to an end, like I said, at the end of March. And at the moment, what the chair and the partners are looking at is what priorities to consider and to choose for the next reporting period, which will be from 2022 April right through to 2020. And in considering these, the partnership, the strategic partners, along with the independent chair, have looked at different emerging themes. We've held quality conversations with frontline practitioners. Of course, we can't engage all practitioners in roundtable meetings, so what we've also done is substituted those roundtable discussions with an online consultation form that was sent out at the beginning of January to all frontline practitioners working within the partnership to complete. There were a series of about 5 questions asking them to feedback on the priorities that we currently have and what's emerging for them and what their emerging concerns are, so that we can marry up what we can see in the data, what their frontline practitioners are seeing, and then we can select the priorities from there. And so that session, the roundtable session, was held in December. The questionnaire that we've sent out comes to an end, or deadline is next Friday. So once we've got that consultation, we'll marry up all that data, and then the chair and the strategic partners will look at what types of priorities to select going forward. That's the work around priority. In terms of joint work, we've been working across the board, so adult safeguarding boards, the health and wellbeing board, and the community safety partnership board, looking at priorities that are across that cut across all boards. So what we've done is we've got a document that shows all the priorities across the board, and like I've just said, we're refreshing our priorities, the health and wellbeing theirs. So this document will be a dynamic document that we can update as each board refreshes its priorities. So that document has more or less been agreed, but it just needs to go through our governance structure to make sure that every single board is happy with the way it looks and the feel and the priorities that are contained in it. But it, like I said, it'll be dynamic. So as soon as we refresh our priorities, those will be updated and with the other boards as well. But it's just to make sure that we're not duplicating work, but we know what each and every one of us are doing, and where we can do shared work, we do that. The areas of shared work. In October last year, we held a conference. So the conference was held in partnership with Thurrock Children's Social Care, and it was called Building Better Connections, and it was primarily based around contextual safeguarding and extrafamilial harm. And we had Professor Carly Furman from Durham University deliver quite an emotive input in terms of the emerging themes of extrafamilial harm, so harm to children outside of the home, as opposed to what some children experience within the home. That conference was very well received. We had over 140 people, and some counsellors indeed attended as well. Frontline practitioners attended, attendees from across the partnership attended, and those people fed back that it was really timely at the time because of the emerging situation that's happening in terms of some pockets of extrafamilial harm that's happening. So it actually helped practitioners and agency members to focus and think about what they could be seeing and how they would respond to some of the issues that are emerging for them. In terms of our annual audit, so we've got an annual audit schedule which pinpoints topics that we want to go and do deep dives into cases. This is cases that we look at. We pick randomly certain cases around topics. So we'll look at things like transfers in. We'll look at support provided to families at the point of need. We'll look at different areas of neglect, how neglect is assessed and how it's dealt with, and we'll pull out some of those issues where we're doing really well, good practice is being exemplified in the work that we do, and we'll also pull out where we need to do something different or better. So all agencies get the feedback on there, and then we go back, and if some of the issues are things that are pertinent for a re-audit, then we re-audit to see how far forward we've come as well with those. In terms of the role of the Lscp with education, what we need to do is to make sure that education are completing their compliance in terms of safeguarding. So what we did at the end of last year, we send out the safeguarding audits to all schools, and this is to assess how well safeguarding is being managed and embedded through the school. So this is areas of safeguarding in terms of training for staff. This is how well their policies and procedures are being managed. So we've collected some of that information, and we're in the process of collating it, analysing, and a report is being in the process of being written. Once that report has been written, that feedback will go back to schools in terms of the highlighted areas where more work needs to be done, and indeed also feedback where schools are doing really well in terms of their safeguarding measures. In terms of our thematic review, so you may know that early last year, there was an incident with 2 youths, and in terms of that, we commissioned as the Lscp a thematic review into serious youth violence and gang-related crime. The external reviewer has completed all his data gathering and has indeed met up with another reviewer who did a deep dive into the child perpetrator's case to see what lessons could be learned, if any, of what we have done with that child. And so those 2 reports will be married together, and a learning report will be published either by the end of February or early March. And with that learning document will be some recommendations for where we can do things differently. From that learning document with recommendations, we will hold a multi-agency meeting that looks at those recommendations and will agree actions, and the actions that will have the biggest or the most impact in terms of how we can improve certain areas going forward. And by having a multi-agency meeting to agree those actions means that everyone is of the same understanding of what needs to happen in order to move forward. And that's where we have that. Once that has been agreed through the governance structure, we set to work to put those actions into place and to make sure that they're in. One of the current priorities for the Lscp, as I've said, is neglect. And out of that priority, we have convened a neglect subgroup, which is attended by multi-agency practitioners. And the main focus is to reduce the prevalence and the impact of neglect. And we've got a framework in place in terms of how we intend to do that. Because the subgroup was created quite late into the priority setting period, this is probably one of those priorities that we will go over into the next year. But I can't say that for sure because it's not my decision to make, but because of that work that is ongoing, it's really one of those priorities. That I'll move on to the case reviews update. So in terms of our case reviews, you'll know that we've got a few that were published. So Sam and Carl, as you can see in your bundle, was published in 2020, and that action plan for that report listed 18 actionable areas. I'm pleased to say that lots of work has been done to progress those actions, and in your bundle you'll see that the majority of those actions are RAG rated green and blue, with the exception of 2 areas where we still some work left to be done. One of those is reflective practice sessions, and those have been booked in for February, April and June. Yep, February, April and June. And those were for practitioners to kind of get some input and to reflect on the areas of neglect, transitions and transfers, and unexplained bruising. The other outstanding action is to create and implement models of multi-agency group supervision. So this was an action around multi-agency practitioners coming together to discuss cases that are a little bit more complex than that are necessary, and to kind of have that face-to-face conversation about who knows what, who can push a case forward. If a case is kind of stuck in an area, what can be done as a multi-agency group to move that case forward, and to make sure that everyone that's involved in that family knows what the others are doing and can complete the work that's being done. So it's about having those discussions. So we've got some pilot sessions ready to go, and those sessions will be delivered over the next few months. In terms of Frankie, Frankie is a case that was published in 2020 also, and we've made good work with that action plan. So we had 14 actionable areas, and we're down to 1 recommendation that is RAG rated amber. So work has begun on it, but it hasn't been completed yet, and that is for the Lscp to lead a review on how agencies respond to the impact of children when a parent is given a custodial sentence. And what we've planned for that is a dip sample audit of where we can pull out cases where a child, a parent has been given a custodial sentence, and we can pull out and look at areas of good practice. We can look at what, if there are any areas for concern within those cases and what we can do differently, pull that out and have those multi-agency discussions in terms of what's working well, what's not working and what needs to be done differently. That's been planned in place as well. Moving down to the peer review action plan, we'll be pleased to know that that action plan is now completed. There are no amber actions on that action plan. All actions are blue. And moving down to Leo action plan, published in February 21. Those we've got 12, 14 actionable areas of the 12 recommendations, and 11 out of those 15 action green. There are 3 remaining actions with work ongoing on them. All of those actions have started and work is on. We just need to complete them. So recommendations 1.1 and 1.2, while the family were professionals didn't always think a wider perspective in family, who else is involved in this family, which agencies are involved. So what we've got is there is a set approach. So Southend and Thurrock are working to family model across all 3 areas. Started to do some of that linking work and sharing work. We've used the podcast, our website. Along with that podcast, it explains what we think family also has some resources to go with that. There is planned a Think Family Summit, Scrutiny. Station 11 is also outstanding, but work has been we've started to do a survey to answer. It's really essentially pull out files to see that whether they're actually getting feedback from social care when that is open to them. We've started to do those surveys. Feedback has been mixed and good, but we haven't finished that yet, so beyond there of me to give some of those. Jane Ashley, again, that action plan is due to be signed off. It has been agreed at multi-agency level and just needs to be signed off.
Thank you. Jenny, do you want to speak to this at all?
Just very briefly, because I know members will want to talk about it. I just want to say that all the actions that Priscilla has described are about embedding and supporting multi-agency working and strengthening the partnership. And we've been given a lot of examples of that with schools, and particularly around young people and the thematic review around serious youth violence. And the audit work is multi-agency, so it's not just children's services records that are looked at, but it's health records, school records and so forth. So, you know, a really strong framework which we'll continue to build on. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you for the report, Priscilla. I want to thank you because you did give me exactly what I asked for at the last meeting, and I'm very grateful for that. And I found it really easy to go through and scrutinise all. Very clear, I could see still needed. So yeah, that was great. I think the main question that I had is why does it take so long? The children have died. I mean, Sam and Frank died in 2018. The report wasn't published till, you know, 2 years later, and then we're still working on the recommendations. And even though it sounds like we're near completion on. So I'm just wondering what are the factors? Does it normally take that long, or is that particularly long?
And it depends on the what's going on with the collection of information before it's written. So that whole process of there's a rapid review after the serious incident timescales around that and collect the information. There's lots of multi-agency meetings. One agency, the other, it's really difficult to get people around the table together. Then from there, you need to, the reviewer then goes and has interviews, looks at paperwork, cases, scrutinises that, comes back, then a draft report is written. It then has to go out to check and make sure that they agree, and I suppose not necessarily just agree, but what's written is accurate, picked up in. So it is a long time for some of these cases, I agree, but the standard would be at least within a year we should have that turn. So,
Okay, so 2 years is.
Yeah, Sheila. So I just wanted to add, in addition to that, I think in both those cases you had external processes going on, which coroner's, as well as police investigation, and so we have to wait. And for those processes. So if there was a call, have to wait for all of us to finish before we can think of the call. If you then write is investigation. I don't think in either of these cases there was charges trial, but it hadn't been. Doesn't mean we can't do the learning.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, sort of, if I was a member of the general public, and I know the cases where residents really wanting to know why the child has died, and it's been a long time, and they're worried and making all kinds of things up, really, about what it might be. Jenny, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you. I think they're very relevant questions. And as I was just going to really say what Sheila said, that doesn't mean to say that actions and learning doesn't get going from the first time that a sad incident is looked at. And by the time the report's written, a lot of those actions may well have been put in place and are already being monitored. I think the other thing to say is that the relatively new system of rapid reviews, quick reviews, and then a longer one if that's needed, that enables, any incident to be looked at quickly in reasonable depth, actions to be put in place, and then if there needs to be a deeper look going into a full local learning review, then that can take place. So it's really important that we emphasise that learning and actions don't wait for the final review.
Thank you. I think that second, maybe it's more of a point. Just that I think as a matter of course, if there are these serious case reviews, I think they should come to Children's Services overviews. Just as a matter of course, I mean, this is a standing item on the agenda. So, if there are plans to hold a serious case review, then I think it should be brought just so members can, comfort themselves that learning is taking place, action is taking place, and updated on that. Rather than coming when when it's sort of nearly over. Did you want to speak on that? Is that an old hand, Jenny? You've still got your hand up, did you? Oh, right, okay, that's an old hand. Okay. Did members have any questions?
Just a quick one, Chair. You mentioned that the Lscp has started the process of identifying its priorities for 22-24, that you're doing a frontline practitioner survey. Do you have any target and or expectation of participation? Are we looking at 90, 95, 100% participation, or
we'd like 100%. We'd like everybody that works for the agency or the partnership to give their views, because that's where we're going to be able to get the frontline information. So, but I suppose when we've done consultations before, we've kind of got about 50%. So we'll probably be there or thereabouts.
question.
Okay, so let's move to recommendation one. The committee note the update of the work on the Lscp and progress made. And I've said to Priscilla she's very happy to, we're very happy for her to leave now that her slot is over, and of course the same goes for you, Jenny. No, that's fine, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Jenny.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, we'll move on to item 7, and that's the verbal update on the written statement of action, the outcome of the Austin visit to same service.
And I'll take with that one, Sheila.
I've got,
Oh, let me,
I've got your name on the,
that's fine.
I've got your
Let-
name on my piece of paper, so.
Let me say, that's absolutely fine. So members will have received the Ofsted revisit sort of report. We emailed it round. It will actually go onto the Ofsted website on Thursday. And what it actually says, colleagues, is that we have made sufficient progress in all of the areas that have been identified when Ofsted came in 2019. There are some things that Ofsted told us about, and actually, to be fair, we said to Ofsted, we still think we've got further work to do. There will always be further work to do, and we recognise that. But I hope committee are really pleased with the report. We're really pleased with the report. One of the things I did want to say is when I met with the Ofsted inspector, clearly we have to send a whole raft of information, colleagues. So we upload it all onto a portal. And one of the things that we uploaded was the overview and scrutiny report and the appendix that goes to every overview and scrutiny. And the inspector made a point of saying to me that he found it incredibly useful. It enabled him to quickly look at where we were and where we could find the evidence and the information. And the fact that Children's Overview and Scrutiny had taken such a keen interest in this, he felt was a real strength. And I thought that would be a nice thing to say to committee this evening, because you've been with us on this journey. You know, we've provided this report. I have to say, when we sort of had the feedback at the end of the session, it's quite emotional actually, because it had been sort of lots and lots of hard work. The SEND team had worked incredibly hard, but it's about the wider partnership. It's interesting what we were just saying about the Nscp. It's no different with SEND. We're in a partnership where the child or the young person is at the centre, and then there's a whole raft of people wrapped around that child or young person to absolutely make a difference to them. So I think I really hope committee are pleased with the outcome. You know, we probably rang Ofsted mostly every day to say, can we please get this sent out to committee for this meeting, because we wanted you to see it. Sheila, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add at that point.
Really, I think it is a fair report. Highlights the good things that have been achieved, and as always, things that we still work on. A lot of hard work has gone into partnership and things being
Well done. I mean, it's good that all areas are now considered satisfactory. I mean, there are a few areas obviously to keep working. But it's been nice to take that improvement journey with you. Kind of you to say that the committee was helpful. I think the down to the hard work in the council and within children. So yes, any questions?
I have a question, Chair. I mean, just saying, congratulations, well done. Always difficult getting set a target as stringent as one they could set. And get that, and whilst at the same time, just to get a right to comment, it hasn't been sent.
Sorry about that.
Well, you know, a lot of substitute members on committees, and it's just as courteous work. Being the chair.
I do apologise, council, again.
Any other members like to make a comment? Well done, because you did work hard on it, and you know, has been a couple of years coming to scrutiny as a standing item. So we certainly did scrutinise that to
And
date. I'm glad you've had a
expect to
positive.
recognise that.
Yeah, I'm glad you've had a positive. Okay, so no recommendations to agree on that one. So we'll move on to item 8, which is home to school transport on pages 57 to 64. Can I ask Sarah Williams?
Thank you, Chair. The report here before you is to give an overview on home to school transport. And to give you an idea about some of the projects that we're working on. As you may know, the council has actually duty to provide transport for children and to facilitate transport for ages 5 to 16, and in some cases up to the age of 25, so where they might have care. Currently, we transport 1,161 students, and that's across 75 in the service. Some of those routes might be by bus. We also look at train tickets and bus tickets, as well as reimbursements. So there's a number of ways that we and those are some of those categories that look at the rule to ensure that they're sustainable for young people. We've been undertaking a review, just introducing cost-saving measures such as decommissioning, that might be deemed unsafe, and the council to enable those. Also looked at the introduction of capital budgets, something new that we've looked at and investigate, see what we can do with that. We've also introduced some measures around travel time. See as a principle, particularly students, working with them to travel train them, where they have somebody that can with them, takes that journey, but period from 3 months. So they learn to travel that whole route with the hope that then becoming one of our projects. We're also looking at retraining or additional training systems for children that have got very that would be for children that extremely complex needs, so that we can ensure that our passengers are fully trained and you know, able to support those children. I'll move on and just give you a bit more of an update on some of our activities, some of those projects that we've already talked about. Unsafe routes is along with the public training is meant transport. That's something new. I'll move on to the projects in a bit more detail and take the answer. I think what I would probably like to start off by saying is that we make no decisions. Keep filling in that. It's something that we are looking at as we do regularly with all unsafe routes. There are no decisions. It's something that we are investigating and reviewing options as we would now do with the we have looked at a number of alternatives, so you know, and haven't concluded at this stage. You know, we've sought some legal advice in different options, and you know, it could be that we deemed safe once we have done
by no means is to parents that are kind of big, you know, all of this. Just to give you a bit of context, there's 6 contracted buses that take students from East Tilbury to St Clair's. You know, we've thought about issues around safety and capacity. So, you know, those factors. Also had a professional risk assessment taken into that group. We are, you know, we've looked at alternative routes such as this. We've had some legal advice, and what I would say is that any children that are over distance or families are, we would still it's then if we look at post 16, we talked about the travel training program. It's something that we've piloted with the students already, and actually we've some students that were on contracted vehicles that are now get on a train or get a bus and travel to establishment, and it has given them huge amounts of and basically travel. So with that in mind, we are thinking about, you know, that work doing the students now like to think about offering that from year 9, so very early stage, we're starting to those young. So rather than wait until they're year 11 and further education. We've also highlighted the sustainable travel options, use of public transport, which will then help to reduce emissions. So those are some of the things to start looking at. Then if we look at the introduction of personal travel budget, that's something that we've started to look at in more detail. So that's personal travel to and that allows the parent to choose the kind of rather than vehicle that child might be other children knows it allows, and that could be, you know, a local taxi company doesn't necessarily be transport that's within the council framework. So it opens up the opportunity to be a bit more then if we move on to looking at just the implementation budget, that's something that is should allow them to utilise their, you know, have those funds up front, not like us, and support it. We're in the process of looking at different options. We're hoping that that piece of work okay, what are the other areas? Behaviour management. Work that we do with this. Lots of young. Actually. But what we've looked at. And support their troubles. Sometimes that bit and sometimes journalists can be quite a long time, particularly if they're travelling outside. You know, they could be. And all of that. So we want to be able to work with those young, work with those staff, travel, without distress. That's another point. In terms of consultation, just sort of going back to, we did a travel awareness survey between the 9th and the 31st of December. So that was a survey, it wasn't. And that was really to understand and get some insight into perceptions and understandings how you have children. Safety, do they know what they're because we're not changing anything. Just to gauge it. Hopefully, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I think there's some good proposals in there, definitely. I think my main problem with this is how it's been presented as all about children coming into being able to travel independently, whereas the detail of it doesn't really back that up. So just to put it in context, can you tell me how much the home school transport budget was overspent?
I think it's don't have the exact. So around about 800.
And getting rid of the St Clair's bus, how much was that?
Just short of 2.
So I mean, really, I think it's a bit disingenuous to present this in text of this about independent travel. Because really, this is about budget pressure. Responsible.
So it's not just about that. Absolutely, best ways for young people to be able to travel. Because if it's about budget pressure, we wouldn't be putting up. Haven't stopped any. What I'm saying is that young people with special education needs can help support travel. That's not saying we won't be helping them to travel. That is about independence. They can travel independently without having to get in with young. So it's not just about saying, obviously we have to be council. This is money that everybody pays into. So we have to be mindful of that, but it isn't saying it, to save 800 travel for people. That's not going to save that amount of money.
Okay, but there are pressure, budget pressure. There's no mention of that. So I just wanted to make that. And I'll open to them.
Yeah, so thank you. Just to be clear on this, talk about ultimately that children wouldn't quote for being paid. What does that look like? I know we've got statutory duty for a whole raft of children, but at the moment we're paying for children that are to go to school could afford to pay if it wasn't for the fact that they're do we know what sort of percentage of children that would be? Got an idea about that?
Not at this. You mean for the unsafe group?
But the unsafe group is particularly
We have got a high number of children that are, you know, are this trouble boys. And they are, you know, through this, that walking. Of all of those children. Yeah, and do get through.
We appreciate you might have applicable get to know what percentage of those children would be
Yes.
not
That's
free transfer.
That's part of the ongoing work, which is why there's notice. And why we are looking at those routes. This is not the. We all have looked at. So it just so happens. There's at the moment. And of course, you know. So look at it. That might look.
Yeah, can I just, a few questions, can I just clarify question? That's what we hope.
Yeah.
So what is the total budget at the moment?
You can get that from them.
Bit hard to. So, don't know what the budget is, but we know that it's overspent by 800,000.
You know what budget, but we don't say we have the exact figure. Get that figure, didn't you? Budget.
Around about $1 million of overspending. And baked into the budget next year as savings of. So you save 100.
There's certainly demand. Budget, yeah.
As we go through, I'm just intrigued by the introduction, reference to the goals set out at the COP26 summit. Could you tell me what goal would you have in mind?
This is really around sort of sustainable travel. We're, you know, that's part of the work that we're doing. So we've got all of the things we're looking at. Part of the work that we're doing. But, you know, we know that sustainable travel isn't, and looking part of the work.
So the COP26 goals were set in advance of COP. This doesn't refer to any specific goals, just the general COP-ishness. So have done any baseline work then? Tell us how many tons of carbon it's forwards and place points. But that is something you.
It is something that we look at. You know, I'm happy to take away.
No, I just think we're going to talk about emissions and baseline actually being specific. Clearly, taking the 6 buses off the my misunderstanding of how to save route. Speak around the table. Think of the safe route. What you're saying is that that isn't necessarily the definition. The definition can be.
It can be, you know, that the route that particularly. But it's what we're looking at actually, are there other options? Are there most that would, you know, make sure that we are but allows travel different way.
So back to that definition, unsafe route. So the walking route is clearly unsafe. Identify different form of transport, then air it as a safe route.
We are looking at that. That's what we're looking.
So I don't quite understand why the bus isn't the same route.
That is one option. The contracted bus is one.
But the bus is already there, isn't it? So just talking about it's not a walking. So the definition isn't what I think it to be. It's just a bit.
Because the law.
But it's. How many people's code?
Across 6.
Move on to basically the personal transport. Personal travel budget, which is public travel expenses, is by superintendent systems for travel. It ends by saying students assessed as not eligible. Can you just talk a little bit about the eligibility criteria is because surely then they're not getting transferred. That's not going to change, is it?
We look at each. Their individual.
So you're going to reassess people that aren't getting this.
Reassess them, everybody get it on. We're by the top. So then we would reassess them and, you know, is, you know, as an option, the same as we do with fuel reimbursement. So as new application, that will be something that we may, you know, if that's something that might be something we offer before fuel reimbursement, or we offer.
But only if they're reassessed and are still eligible. As I say, it's eligible. This is coming out. Signing so the next one, the travel training.
Yes.
It says that we identified 19 people, 11 started the process back in August, and only one has been successful.
That's at the time of like some children and some kids on where they're travelling takes a lot of time. And depending on things, actually takes a long time for them to go through that program.
It
And
wasn't a written report long ago.
Not that long time.
So in 6 months, it's
Yes.
certainly what
Not anything that is part of the work that we're doing on people. Just to see how we.
I do understand that, but it just looks a bit stark, doesn't it? Personal travel budgets in financial implications which solves this has already been adopted by other local authorities. As well.
This part year last year. The number.
That's useful because survey talking about. There's no detail of what the survey said. Can you tell us what the survey was?
I don't have the survey results. Actually, put together. I think there were some things around students knowing what that there's something around safety, coverage. I don't think the response was being, I think it's, you know, it's, that was a certain, you know, affairs, do surveys. That's that come down. But I'm happy to get the results and then share them.
Sorry, first, can I go to councillor Aaron first? I'll go to committee.
It's just a really quick one, Chair. You mentioned that those children that are travelling, for example, to St Clair's via other thresholds on the safe route. So, for example, if they're less well off, etc. If it's deemed unsafe, those travelling by that criteria still get free home to school transport. What is that benchmark? Is it any family that's in receipt of any kind of benefit, a particular kind of benefit?
Those that are excuse me, but if we're looking at making payments, parents, I feel that there would be alternatives. But majority of the children still going to be on the buses, whether it's because they follow distance or financial. So that contractor will be paid for that contract, but he may have empty seats. So if you're going to be paying, saving 10 children, that doesn't cover what you told, does it? Now, because the contractor will put in X amount per day for that vehicle, doesn't charge it. So in theory, if say 20 families think, oh yeah, we have a cap, then that's adding to the budget as well as emissions, because you've still got buses, which obviously bigger vehicles, pollution, but I'm based on that score because buses actually go for a PS3 test on emissions. Most cars. So in theory, we could still have the buses, but 40 cars. I can't see logic. No, and I that's why we are looking and that. Anyway. And the bus and the seat. So 15 years ago. That's what I'm partying at St Clair. If you get it, you've got 376 children. So that potentially could be 300 parents dropping their children. They're going to. There's still problems with parking. Last thing I attended the school, you looked at the parking, you couldn't get a pin between cars. They've seen the parking, I think it's nice on some. And potentially, you could have much more cars. Use, it's not good for the environment. Yeah, that's why we taken on board. As everybody. East Tilbury does not have public services. Not nibs. They run every hour. But don't think they're actually. They're quite small buses. They're probably 30 cent bus. I can't see often, you know, children on that situation. It's just ridiculous, especially children at that platform. Is the trains, even when they get into the station for that time, usually full up into children who each other can't do it. They're going to see it.
That's why that's work that we're doing. Thinking about all.
It isn't learned. But they will be.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, I think, what we've got, I think we, so we launch our own. I think would be. Is there an option? Bear in mind that the buses are going to have to sort of families. That's true. It's like bus, but that way, the bus doesn't get it.
Everything is at this at a point when we think we are, then, you know.
Chair, thank you for your report. Sounds like some great work on post 16 and things like that, but as you can expect, I'm mostly in. Councillor very still. As other councillors have already said, there is probably concerns and there is some down the road. Have any officers actually walked the alternative routes into the school at closing time or starting the school day, just to see how it's run at the moment down there? That could take place if this idea is to explore further. I can look on the government website. It says about children from public school age, so secondary schools. It says one of the very clear black and white. There's no safe walking school transport. So I've looked at the section of the Education Act and Children's Family Act. So are we still taking the second legal advice to see, are we looking to see which part of which act there is that walking route and weight? And is that being sourced externally or internally? Is the legal advice being, is it internally from the council or externally to give what to assess that about the walking?
That's being considered. We're doing all our best to get to that financial wrestling.
Final question. Would a safe walking route need to have a curb?
Yes.
No curbs on.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say that I'm a bit puzzled because reading the report, it sounded to me like this was going to happen. Or like even more. So therefore, the council having sought external legal advice, believes that routes to prepare school can be prepared safe or to alternative route identified. This won't be an alternative. And it's obvious that looking at the video from there's no way that route could be safe. How was the legal advice of the ascertained without anybody actually going and walking? Okay, so what is it based
We
on?
do know that route, so it's
Right.
based on guidance and so, you know, that's some of the work.
I thought that we Councillor Kent's question, actually, you did say that it's the water safe, so you're deeming that safe?
We are looking at
The options are train,
bus, so we're looking at.
Sorry, Chase.
I just have one thing, it's not actually specifically about St Clair's. My only concern is if we do, and I think it's right, you should be looking at it, and you should be, as things change and buildings. I actually do think this is what I do. The only thing is if you do take away the transport, the actual children that would choose to actually attend, because there'll be a lot of parents there that can't get out of bed and say, we suffered that in the COVID. That's my concern, not so much for the transport, just the children that need to be in school. And secondly, with the financial budgets, and you said you've been given in advance, is there any way that they have to use that money for transport? Because again, as we know, that was my only concern, that even when we gave out the budgets or the vouchers for meals during COVID, they weren't used for that.
That's just looking at.
I'm sure you are, just wanted to make sure that it was clear to the point.
so, yeah, I mean, I've got no problem with it. Safe, but I think sort of the example that we've got here is can't be made safe. And claim that we take this bus service away for an issue. So I'm glad to hear the setback from claimants. What else now needs to happen?
We need to carry on looking at, thinking about, now need to really, you know, everything that we've gathered.
But the legal advice has said that we can replace.
It has, but we are further discussing that.
Okay, so they might change their mind.
They might offer further advice.
Right, well, I mean, personally, I'm really unhappy at this proposal, and I certainly won't recommend the proposal to that bus service to Doctor. That's the thing.
Yeah, just one last. Councillor Massey's got the WW be very clear. So there's no safe walking. I believe that. Just want to clarify. There. Don't want to see is legal gymnastics to try and look at that shouldn't be. I'd like it to be, but clearly it's safe. I just. So it's very clear.
What I'd like is an update across. Particularly as we get. This is not something, you know, this is the things that we're looking at. Rather than proposals that we're putting. This is just something.
particular reason.
No, because actually, you know, it's good to give an update on what we're looking at currently. So that's one of, you know, unsafe routes is something, but you know, we are, you know, that particular viruses.
So, yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. You're just presenting some work that you've been doing, but I mean, I think it's very clear from the committee that I consider this to be a possibility to declare this week as a walking. If anybody that has seen the video, basically there's no curbs at some places, there's no actual grass verge to walk along on both sides of the road, so it would be highly unsafe. Things to go by the way farmers' fields. So there's no lighting. So really, I can't understand how any legal advice could have got to the stage of his safe.
I think I'd say that, you know, that walking affects children.
So that's conclusive then that given the definition of size, so this is a no-brainer.
That
Yeah.
is that will. There are no, we wouldn't expect, you know, it's. That's the plan, yeah. And that probably, it's, and have to put, promise, big language. But it had all, little bit was. Safety measure, big language. Councillor, how come you, looking forward, how come now you instead of spending on trains, how come you was very skipping taking was trains? It would have to be example. Be some. Do know that Thurrock has actually only unsafe because there's, you know, that would be something that, you know, that would be the way to enable children to store. That's what I see.
Having lived on that those roads for 25 years of my life, it's no dangerous. Really agree there was well lit curbside, you know, without deposition, it'd be nothing's impossible, although there's sides of yeah, I think that would be a lot more comfortable. And going from, like you say, there's new developments coming through, it's all about walking, cycling, I get that. So yes, we see in the future that this potentially could overall go on 20 feet.
I think questions. And I think I would like to emphasise to Cabinet. I know you say no decisions are. You would comment upon the undertaking outlined as a lineage of. I think I'm really temperature because none of us support declaration of. We adding another recommendation that says that.
Sorry, just confirm so that non-committee declares walking route safely. Yeah.
Just to come back to the travel training. I mean, so we've spoken about homeschool transport times, and obviously last year we transport. I think there are some good ideas in there. What I was a bit surprised at, because I've been told sort of quite a few times by Michelle that parents and children were very excited about being more independent, travelling more independently. So I know Councillor Kev has already raised this. I was quite surprised to see that out of the 19 young people identified travel training program, only 4 took part and only 1 training. Now down from your question that maybe the other 3 will. I'd take them a bit longer, but that's not a great success, is it? It's not a very good conversion rate.
We'll pick that one up.
Yeah.
No, I hear what you're saying, Chair. I think some of the challenges is that people become very infused with something, don't they? And I think, yeah, this looks a really good idea. And you have to put it into practice and you have to look at how that actually works for your child. And I think that's some of the challenge we've had. We've learned from that. We've learned from that experience. As we've said in the report, I think one of the things for us is to introduce it a lot earlier, to start having the conversations a lot earlier. So at year 9 transitions, to start having that conversation to say, actually, you know, you may need to consider, would you consider? And actually, one of the things I'm interested in working with parents, remember I said right at the start, it's a partnership. So working with parents to say, you know, do you travel independently with your child? You know, do you use your car all the time? Do you use public transport? How are you working with your child? And that's not to say all emphasis on the parent, but there is some responsibility here, Chair, for the parents to say, actually, how are you working with your child? And I want to start that conversation a lot earlier. So I want to start that conversation at year 9 transitions. Then we've got the travel training programme in place. And what we do know is where it works and where we've seen it work well, it really does enable that young person to gain those independent sort of skills that they're going to need as they transition into adulthood. So I think the lessons we've learned is we need to start at an earlier stage. We need to be saying to the parent, how can we work as a partnership? You know, when I speak to parents, I speak to parents a lot, it's always about how do we work in partnerships for your child, your young person? You know, are there ways in which you can support with that? You know, is there ways in which you can think about, you know, what is the local bus routes? What is the train routes? You know, how do you get the train to, I don't know, the shopping precincts or whatever? So I think that's what we've learned, Chair. So our aim is to see sort of an increase in that going forward. But there's no doubt that people were really enthusiastic. And then when you actually start it, people got slightly nervous about it. And I think it's a conversation at a much earlier stage.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the view that you should start it early. I see some people. And I do support being able to travel. My only concern is that, you know, there possibly are some children that aren't going to be able to travel independently. How that was going to affect them if they chose to. So, of the other 3 that started the training, did they drop out or are they still continuing?
No, they're still continuing. They're still sort of continuing. I think we also had some more issues with COVID. I don't want to keep blaming COVID, but there were some more issues with that. That unsettled people again, because there's no doubt that did unsettle people. So, you know, there were some issues there, but no, they are continuing. As I said, for me, the learning, significant learning is we need to start at a much earlier age and just really promote it and see it as a real positive towards independence and that transition into adulthood.
Any other questions or comments?
For me, just kind of rounding it up is you know, we have responsibility of obligation to get the children to school. Patients to make sure they get safely as possible. It's just done the story, especially with CMD children. Sometimes difficult to get those young people to the place of learning, and then to actually get off the bus or out of the cab or whatever it is, because they're so stressed about it. Just want us to be really careful that any changes that we are centred around the child, not around the opinions of policy. Don't want to cut right. Same as all of us, we know different children. Getting to work, getting to school shouldn't be the most stressful part. Not careful to run the risk of making it so stressful. Actually, has damaged just the sensitive thing change.
Still hasn't offered smart transport a journey to from the school to the road should very pleasurable. And normally it's I've done special needs children, some of which have gone off to do travel training, which they've been very excited about. But on the odd day, when the bus doesn't turn up, they're at the bus stop, something isn't set in stone, it's like finishes. It's like, I don't do that anymore. Back on the bus, it is quite stressful when you're talking about even a 14-year-old that has special needs. Suddenly, as most of those families, parents with sort of sheltered their child is very normal. Suddenly, well, you've got to be independent. Like, that itself, it sounds brilliant with some children. Some children, it's not fortunate as it is, it's just the reality. I just thought I'd add that.
Michelle, Sarah?
I was just going to say, you know, that's why we spend a lot. You know, that travel train. They have been assessed. You'd be able to, you know, that 6 months, it could take a year. It's about making sure that those eventually, you know, any little thing that could happen that children with special needs find difficult in terms of change, that routines, you know, those things that you know, that's why we make sure that actually they are given training, tested, comfortable enough. Just I think we speak a lot, singing about partnership, and it really is a partnership. You know, we place the child and young person. So, and you're right to recognise with some children, it's not possible for them to travel independently, and we recognise. Of course, we will ensure that they're sort of taken to. That's actually the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So
For some children,
children,
yeah.
but you know what we also want to do is promote the opportunity for independence, because that's really important. And that being able to travel independently is part of that ongoing process around travel.
Any questions? So let's move to the recommendations. There was 1.1 that went in common open related and transport in relation to the area. And Liz, would you just want to read out what we've got?
Yeah. So 1.2, the committee agrees that the walking route to St Clair's School unsafe walking route.
Yeah, Yes.
Thank you, Sarah. If you want to go, please feel free. Okay, moving on to item 9, education and skills operating model, pages 65 to 76. Michelle, I believe you're report. Oh, sorry, I should say Councillor Sam. Let's give Councillor Salmons and Councillor Massey a chance to. Thank you. You're welcome. You've got your contribution.
And thank you, colleagues. Excuse me. So this report sets out the education and skills operating model. If committee members would remember, I brought a report around October time, sort of outlining and talking a lot about the operating model, and the committee said, can you provide a report that tells us what the operating model is? So what I've got here is how education and skills is configured, how it is currently operating. One of the things I wanted to recognise actually, and I think it's an important thing to recognise, the council have always been very committed to skills and skills development. So it is around education and skills and how we support, you know, I often say from 0 right up to 99, because as you know, I've got all of the early years, primary, secondary, post-16 and adult learning, adult community learning. So that all comes in together. What we looked at when we undertook the review was how we could realign some of the work going forward. Committee are very aware that all of our schools, bar one, are academies now. And as such, many of the duties that would have sat with the local authority have now moved across to the academies. An example of that is training. So historically, the council would have been the provider of a range of training opportunities for schools. With the introduction of the teaching hubs, of which the Thurrock one is Harris Academy, they now undertake the training. So some of those posts were removed from the structure because that function is being undertaken by one of the local schools. So that's one example. I think another example for us has been particularly around, again, governor development training. Again, that now sits with the teaching hubs and the schools themselves, because the money goes into schools to do that sort of actual training. I think what it enabled us to also think about was how we look at some of the repetitive tasks that we do in the local authority. So looking at some of our data work, and I think that's particularly true when we've looked at the work around SEND. Colleagues will be aware that we brought our 2 data systems together. That has enabled us to have sort of one single site of that in one place, which I have to say Ofsted commented on in their report. And again, that enabled us to realign some of that work going forward. I won't rehearse the nurseries. We've spent time with the nurseries, just to say, as you're aware, it is now in the procurement realm. So we doesn't close until sort of early March time. So we'll see sort of what happens there. Just sort of working through, we've talked a lot around special educational needs. As I said, I won't sort of go over that one, apart from to say clearly, you know, the local authority did invest in special educational needs. I think that's been, you know, that's formed part of the reason why we've enabled or managed to get, you know, the recent report that we've had, the increase in the work that we've got around staff around SEND. Looking at things you'll find interesting, because I'm assuming you've read the report, to be honest. So yes, EHE, elective home educated, has been another one that the committee have been sort of interested in, and this gives you some information around elective home educated. One of the things that I think is interesting around this, and again, I guess colleagues will have picked up some of this, is around children that perhaps haven't returned to school after COVID. So there was a small cohort we were aware of, around 18 students who hadn't returned. My understanding is those have now returned. In the main, I have to say, that was around sort of anxiety, mental health, challenges around mental health and anxiety. And hence we've brought reports to the committee before about school wellbeing surveys and work they've been doing to support around that. I'm very minded, colleagues, and for those that have got a year 11 child, examinations will take place this year. That's been announced. And again, we need to look closely at how our year 11 students are going to cope with that. It's an interesting sort of challenge at the moment, because if you hear some of the things that are coming out of the Department of Education, the examination should take into account what took place or some of the mislearning. That's going to be really difficult, isn't it, around the whole country and seeing how that operates. And I think one of the things that I'm interested in working with our schools about is how we're preparing young people for the move back to, I can see we voted at that one, the move back to sort of examinations. So we'll certainly be doing sort of some work in relation to that. Education support services, we brought all of that under one strategic lead. So that's brought all of our support services, our sort of support services to schools, sort of going forward. I'll give you a little update in here about the free school programme, talk about music service. I'm trying to rattle through because I'm assuming you've read it and I don't want to go through it verbatim, to be honest. I've talked about skills, employability and skills, and the work around Inspire. I mean, I think the thing to recognise around Inspire, of course, is that it does attract significant external funding, the work that it's doing. So I think that's been something that Inspire has done sort of over a number of years. We're currently in the middle of a large programme working with young people who are not in education, employment or training, from 16 to 25. And again, that work is sort of developing and progressing. I'm very proud of the work of that service area, because you had the Inspire briefing notes, so I'm sure you've read that, but our NEET figures remain very low, as well as our unknowns are at 0. So we can be very confident about our NEET colleagues, because we know where all our young people are, because our unknowns are at 0. So I think, again, I think that's sort of been a positive. And just to finish really on the Adult Community College, I mean, there really is a real a new operating model with the Adult Community College. They've relocated to South Essex College. They've got a new operating model where they're out working in the community. They've got some work going on around sort of special needs young people. So again, we've thought strategically around how that needs to look going forward, because I think what the Adult College did incredibly well was mobilised quickly around using IT as a solution. So a number of their learners went to the digital online platforms, but we have to recognise with Adult Community Learning we still need places to deliver, because some of those learners need that. They can't work in the virtual world. They need to have the offer of face-to-face tuition. So I think, colleagues, I'll leave it there. I've rattled through. I hope you've had a chance to sort of read the report.
Thank you, Michelle, for the report. I have indeed read it. No notes. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you for your report, Michelle. With regard to elective home education, you said that we look to make contact with every new EHG case. Do you have an idea with regards to the numbers of how many received that visit and the circumstance of education being received is deemed unfit? Or how often does that happen?
So when that happens, there's a RAG rating. So there's a RAG rating. So we go out and do a visit and we assess what's being offered. If they are ragged as red, then clearly we do not feel that is appropriate education. Then we go back and do further work and talk about or consider with the parent what the option is for that child sort of going forward. There's no doubt that it's a big area for many local authorities now, because actually we did see quite a significant increase, during the pandemic. Parents not wanting to send their children back to school, but we've got some very robust processes in place that actually monitors that. So, and if they're ragged as red, we will continue to go out and monitor that and look to work with the parent to say, actually, it looks as if this isn't going quite as well as you may have hoped. Again, it's about partnership. It's about working with the parent in partnership to say, actually, maybe it didn't work at that school for whatever reason, and these things happen. Well, let's look at what we can do around considering some other sort of educational opportunity.
That's good to hear, because elective home education is certainly something that I would support as being an option out there for parents. It's good to hear that in the event that if someone rated red, that we look to be constructive and talk with them, dialogue, and help them as opposed to any condemnation or any kind of that sort of thing.
I couldn't agree more. I probably use this word so often tonight, but it is about a partnership. It really is, and I think that's the way to work with parents. And what I would like to say is there's a very, very strong cohort of parents locally who EHE, and they do it really well. So I don't want this to be seen as it's not an alternative. You're right, for some parents, it is an alternative they choose, and they do really well at it. But for some parents who may have made that decision for sort of reasons, falling out in schools, all sorts of things happen. For some of those parents, then the decision was made quite rashly, maybe. And what we need to do is make sure that they've got roots back in to the education system.
I'll just say something on that as well. I've got I had a child arrive in my class that had been educated at home, and so what is put in place to make sure that child is up to the levels that are happening in the school? Because I'd have to say the child that's arrived in my class is nowhere near up to that age-related level. So did he slip through the net? So different things are put in place, but he's obviously come back into school after 2 years, and there's a huge difference between what's been taught at home and what he would have, even with COVID, what he would have.
And I think that's an example of where there has been staff going out and looking at that and saying, actually, we need to work with you to get your child back into school. And I appreciate from the school's perspective, and I absolutely appreciate that, when they come into school, it's about what the school can offer to support that child. But, as I said, I think it's always difficult for parents when they decide to elect to home educate. They go in with it with some excitement about it sometimes, and then it doesn't always pan out exactly as they would like it to. So I think that's where we're coming from in relation to that. So,
but there's no parent doesn't have to prove that they are. I don't know how, even as a teacher, I don't know how it works. But I'm just saying they don't have to prove that they're teaching their child up to a certain level. Can you see? Yeah. Because if you're now 8, you should know all your phonic sounds. You should know, various times tables. These things should have been put in place, even if being taught at home.
Yeah. I know. I can see Kate wants to, but there's very little legislation around, which is why it's quite high on the agenda. But I said, for quite a lot of safeguarding. People and Ofsted are looking at phrase as statutory register, because it isn't statutory. Children who are. I got this right. Kate may come in to tell us this, but I think we only have to do, is it 1 visit a year?
yes.
So the local authority responsibility is to do 1 visit into the home to check that there's education going on. I can't insist that it's at curriculum levels or that it's at this level or that level. So it's a real grey area. There are some very passionate people in the community who believe in the right to educate the children at home and to do that, but they're also some more vulnerable families who might get caught educating at home, but maybe don't have the wherewithal to provide the education input to their children. So it's an area of great concern. Since COVID, it's really increased across the whole country, but Thurrock as well.
it is a real area of concern for us for what's happening to some of those children in terms of their educational output, socialising, able to.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's not just
just-
levelling, it's
not
not
just
just
education.
socialisation.
And potentially, you know, safeguarding issues about how to safeguard some of those. All of them, and I don't want that to be that it's all children educated at home, but the numbers have gone up considerably since COVID started, and that's some nervousness about turning children to classrooms in circumstance. Some children have got some family. It's a matter for them. Don't get exposed to something. So it's a massive area. It's all for us in the council, you know.
Thank you. Kate, do you want to come in on this?
Oh, good evening, everyone. Thank you. I must say that the reception is not very good. I can hear the chair and Michelle very well, and the rest of you are very patchy, but I hope I won't repeat anything that you've said. I wanted to add the comments around Inspire, and Michelle mentioned that Inspire generates a lot of traded income. So in our last ESF bid, we're working very closely on track with NEET young people. But in this academic year, we've started working with the at risk of NEET young people in year 11, 12, and 13. So what's happening at present, actually, from January, is my career advisors are working carefully with the Education Welfare Service to make sure that we pick up those children and young people in year 11 who qualify for the on-track program, and usually they are in year 11, who we think might be at risk of need. So at present we're working with 20 of these young people, and the program is individually based around the needs of this young person. So it might be career advice that they might not be getting because they're not in a school. It might be around well-being or mental health. So all the programs are individualized. So I'm hoping that this program will make sure that young people who are home educated will progress into a positive destination in September 22. Yeah, thank you.
Right, thank you, Kate, for that extra piece. Yeah, it's very interesting to hear that it's a grey area.
There is that we've got some resources in the Education Welfare Service that do go out and do those checks and do those visits, and we'll be encouraging parents who may have elected to home educate because of reasons that are not necessarily just about education to get children back into school. What sometimes happens though, if you remove your child from school, will give that place to somebody else. So even if you decide then you want the child to go back, so even if term later, might not have a school place, depending on which school it is. Child out of, there are waiting lists.
I know, having dealt with cases, transport, that as well, if you take the child, parents don't realise when thinking the child. Okay, well, I'm glad that there's been recruitment to that position to deal with the extra load, because I think it's quite a significant children now being educated. Okay, any other questions?
I just want to,
Yeah,
I just want to know if there's any set of curriculum the parents follow those who if they follow any.
It's entirely up to the parents. Decide what education. So long as they can show evidence of doing in terms of education,
They don't have to follow standards. Some parents, that's a real, they do different type of education and value that, and want children to have different types of experience. So it might be taking their children to museums a lot, to doing, you know, something that they think is valuable in terms of learning. It's a real area that's passionate on either side. Some parents are really educate their children, you know, and some parents do it really, really well. Children do well, go to university and do well, but there's quite a lot of children as well. The educational milestones that in fact do go back into the school then to help those children to catch up.
So thanks for the report, Michelle. Yes, I just wanted to ask a question within special educational needs on page 68. So we've got in excess of 1,800 CPs. I can't remember if that's above national average. We are.
Yeah. And what I would say to the committee is one of the things that we're monitoring very, very closely is the level of requests coming in for early years. And part of what we're looking at is that because there is a special educational need, or is it because the children haven't had the normal socialisation, the normal engagement that they would have had? So what we're looking to do is to put some of our sort of early years team within settings to start working with some of those children before we go straight to issuing the HCP plan, because the challenge for us is once you issue a plan, it's very difficult to then look to cease the plan. And I understand the reasons why. I understand. So what we're looking to do is to see what we can do sort of in our early years sector. You know, I'm monitoring that really carefully because we're seeing quite a lot of demand coming through from them. And it's the balance around, is there a need? Is there an actual special educational need there? Or is it because they've not done what they would normally have done? They've spent time, you know, in the nurseries, all of those things, that hasn't happened. So in talking to other colleagues and other local authorities who are also monitoring this one quite.
I mean, Ofsted's sort of with the inspections have said that there's a lot of regression, especially in the early years.
It's a real,
because not getting that contact, that socialisation, that going to the nursery, etc.
so what we're looking to do is use some of our early years resource to support our settings, you know, to look at ways in which going forward. So I'll be monitoring that quite closely to see.
And just sort of moving on, so the operating model you're looking to implement outlines caseworkers, caseload and normal cases. What was it under the old operating model?
Under the old operating model, it's in excess of 300.
Right.
Quite unbelievable caseloads before we introduced the new sort of like model going forward. It's a very, very small team. Right. So, and that was the reason. It's a very small team, and I think we increased the resources so that we can get to an optimum level of 100.
Okay, so just to be clear, this operating model reduced the number of cases from 300. This particular one, not what you did in response to the SENS inspection.
No, this is the new operating model.
So presumably there's been improvement of staff.
Yes.
Yes. So how many staff?
We've got, so we had 5 staff, we've doubled the team, so we've now got 10 caseworkers. We've put in 2 supervisors because the structures weren't right for us. We've also put in a tribunals officer, and that's been tribunals and other sort of QA work. That's been incredibly useful for us because, again, when we do go to tribunal, parents take us to tribunal. That's the system. That's how it operates. But having that resource in there has meant that the colleagues that were normally trying to gravel all that together, we've now got that resource. And of course, and again, the Oxford revisit identifies that one of the key areas for us has been investment in quality assurance. So we've got a quality assurance lens that is working closely with us around the plans and making sure that, you know, we're where we need to be in relation to the plans. All of us QA plans, our QA plans, the whole system QA's plans to make sure we're where we need to be. So there has been significant investment in the SEND service, as well as of course, and Kate's, she hasn't got her hand up, but as well as of course investment into the PFA team. So we've got the Preparing for Adulthood team as well, which again, that was historically one member of staff, now got 4 members of staff. So there has been significant investment, recognising that actually that's what was required to ensure that we were supporting everything.
But and this has happened since this not
No.
this new, just now with this new operating.
The new operating model has been in place now, so but it's all come on incrementally, so it's been over time. So we started with looking at what we needed to do about reducing caseloads. So we recruited staff to do that, but it is a new operating model because it's been a sort of a journey over time, is what I'm going to say.
So yeah, so but this review, did it also deliver cost savings?
It did.
And it's done that partly by reducing staff.
That's reduced staff, but not in SEND. That's the area that.
So that's been
that
ring fenced.
That's the ring fence, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
no reductions in SEND.
Right, okay. So we're talking about the old operating model, not the one that's actually delivering the cost. Okay, so I can see that the training office. I think when you first remind me, Michelle, I think when you first delivered the previous report, you said that there could be up to 13 redundancies.
That was in Janet's report. That was in the social care report.
So
How we managed it in education and skills was we had a number of vacancies. So we looked at the vacancies and we also then looked at, so we had a number, and I think I've put it in the report, we had some staff that were coming up to retirement. So those staff exited the organisation. We had other staff in other areas that we ran a process for that moved into those roles, which meant we were able to give up the role that they were in as part of the force savings.
So are there any, obviously there's a training officer role's gone. Are there any other roles that did that person get redeployed somewhere else, or?
There have been no redundancies in education and skills.
Okay, thank you. That's much clearer about where we've come from and where we've. So thank you. Further questions? Move to the recommendation then. 1.1 to scrutinise the appropriate model outlined in the report. Offer support and challenge. Agrees?
Agreed.
Okay, so we're going to go on to children's social care operation model on pages 77 to 83. And as Janet's not here, am I asking you?
Or substitute for Janet, I'm trying. So unfortunately, Janet was. Fortunately for Janet, she's on annual leave. So I am going to assume that we all had a chance to look at it, and it follows on from last time where you say absolutely that report did outline where there might be redundancies and or savings of those. But this report is actually updating you on this is concentrating on something that we're developing in the place number 1st of April called Think Family. So proposed operating model is really helping to address demand in social care, enable children's social care to continue building on the progress made started in 2021. So at 3.2, it talks about what the Think Family approach is. That's at page 78. And really it is an operating model that is about the whole family approach, which has been used in early years services for some time, early help services. I think family approach is used widely by both health and social care services to outcomes, vulnerable children and adults. So what it does is enable practitioners to build a strong, effective relationship with parents and children as they assess the needs of each family member and coordinate the agency. So I think Priscilla mentioned it earlier as well. Very much about seeing the whole family, just the child, saying, do the parents need support? Is there extended family here? Are there family networks? Are there systems around that we should just about system that's around the child? When we say think family can mostly mean friends, and it is about holding family network meetings at an early stage. So that's not assuming that the professional has all get the family together and their support network and have some really open conversations, and families have to agree. So if there's any conflict, safeguarding issues in different groups, this is for families that might be struggling, might need an extra bit of support, or their children in some way are known to services, saying is what's happening in this family, in this support can offer, and one family, not just us saying that we've got to, and what is it that you better for you? There's been a fair bit of consultation on the service itself and with partners. What we know in children's services, we can't do this by ourselves, so we have to work well. So with a lot of services that families want, like other partners, a health services, school, could be that there's a number of families. So 3.4. There's learning from feedback has informed the shape of the learning, address some of the key issues that are identified. So there's some bullet points and what we're looking at. In addition to the realignment, at point 3.7, in addition to realignment, some previously commissioned services will be redundant. So the parenting assessments have been commissioned from independent social workers, mainly during care, and they can actually say this is that we want to develop our own independent service that does assessments. We are in the process of training individual plans assessment that's specifically designed to assess adults. So, and some of our families, there are learning needs there. Instead of putting them out to external people to come in and assess, part of Think Family, people ourselves, trained to deliver that so that they can work with the families, not assessment there and write a report, actually people who understand that method. So, and we know it's best practice, and it's better for social workers, not instead of bringing expensive people externally asking. And then there's a range of evidence-based parenting programs have been commissioned. Some parents were childcare to these programs, but limiting levels of engagement and impact of what we're saying with the
assessments again under the family umbrella, so that we have connections with a new threat or somebody to say, well, actually, I don't want to. Question. Yeah, so there's a number of those services that are all going to be put together into what's going to be a Think Family, including our contact service based at Oak. So that we want the service to be based at Oaktree, so that it's a nice place for families and children to come to, so they don't have suitable. We have currently what's called family group in service, which is a very particular model, a way of working with. We're going to have, instead of the family group, family network, family group, third way of operating. In order to call yourself family group, you have to have had this particular training. But we're thinking we train people to family network meetings, similar more, but maybe not. Again, because the principle behind is when you get the families together, families take us about getting the families together. Give them, you say, this is what people, professionals want, children, and then the professionals step aside to let whoever's designated as part of the family group to come up with trying to solve. So it might be an auntie who's often involved or going, I didn't realise this was such a big problem. I can take that child Tuesday and Thursday. Someone else might say, I can do the pickup. I can make sure the shopping and support. So it really is empowering families to do that. So it's talking here about so the family network meetings. So it's about being strength based. So it's looking for positives in families and families come up with solutions. That lines in really nicely with our sign for safety practice model that we have in social care, and we have provided that training to partners of what signs of safety is also about. Not about seeing where there's a safeguarding, saying even if there is a safeguarding, how can we make this safer, that child for that family? So it's always looking strength in families and children. So I would say in addition to support to parents and to children, it is about at 3.13, saying that the Think Family approaches include recent best practice guidance from the President's Public Working Group, and we have listed their bullet points. This model will look forward to yeah, so that's learning well.
That was very good presentation. Thank you. It does offer quite a lot of content. And it is, I've seen it. Services done scoping exercise to see the impact of leaving to the there's a number of really sensible ways that you look. So thousands of pounds experience from the family. See how that would. So I think you did talk about the difference between SPs and family network. Yeah. Is that really, so the difference is going to be who runs them? It'll be
So in order to run a family group conference, you have to be certified family group. And it's a model that has to be absolutely, so you have to go to the and only operate a particular way. It can be very time intensive. Family identifying, they think section in it. All of those individuals are met with separately by the family group before they're brought together into a meeting room where the family group will create that meeting. What we've found is, and it's not just here, there's another local authorities what they call family network meetings, because you don't have to have that same level of training in order to be able to get families together and use a strengths-based model. Science safety is what we have training in that staff, including science safety training. So what it means is not paying for somebody that's family group trained, but they can deliver. And call them family network.
I like the sound of this. Sounds like having some kind of some sort of producing family members directly part of the issue that's actually driving up, and often I think I hope better solution. Sure. So I'd like to approach just on page 8 or 3.8. We're talking about the lack of fathers and men generally thinking everything very below 30%, which and the thing family approach sure. Oh, how do you go about sure with that? I mean, it's one thing to say it.
Because they will be working more directly with families, they'll have an individual worker as well, then part of the model is to make sure that we can engage with children to actually get them to the programmes. So I think it's going to be more tailored so that, you know, instead of it being you have to go, it may even be, I think, setting up some just for some men, they feel they're going to go to a group talking about something that we're targeting and can access it, get involved.
So two things, but first of all, just a general welcome. But under the new specifically how we ensure that secondly there's going to be sign.
So the Think family is not taking anything social work. So our frontline social work to taking any savings. Is around about 40. And we've also been very careful about plans control. No manager will and 6 report less than it, so that they have still got this Think family service for our child in need. families like this is not something that we've got as a safeguarding concern we've got. Spending which family actually, but also there are some bottom line. So we are incredibly mindful and not social in touch with them.
Yeah, just one more. Regarding the genograms, I'll show it for a bit. Which you know, something about generational family members. Does that include also, I mean, when I've got that sort of accident, because it includes those kinds of things.
Yeah, it will include bloodline facts, as well as the constituting family. So, who's somebody else, or who's in a relationship with somebody else, or divorced or separated from. So we have all of that, as well as if there are. So I think the genograms is the circles. So it sort of shows. It shows like who the most important links are. So there will have been some of those genograms, extended family, friends, people who might be called aunties that are.
That's good. I mean, I've exactly right.
The only one who children and family. Patients with Okay, we have got 12 minutes left of the meeting. And one item. Can we do it in that time? Well, we haven't got much to do on the work programme, have we?
No,
So,
no, if you're happy to go ahead.
Yeah.
As long as it's free. I'm happy with
Yeah.
that.
Okay, so item 11, because Tiffany's been waiting very patiently.
Thank you. Okay, I'll take 1 minute to introduce why or explain why Headstart housing is used. That was back in 2016 as a pilot, because we could see that our very vulnerable cohort of care leavers willing to sufficient. Our housing director needed a more tailored approach, understanding how to navigate. So we did a trial. It wasn't hugely successful, a lot, and that led to us shaking up Headstart housing, which launched December 28th. We developed a strategy to provide transitional accommodation care leavers, so they've been with us for between 6 to 9 months, but being supported by thereafter to move into housing, they'll be ready. We had a plan that we would return as many care leavers so that we could better support their worker and access the plethora of services that are available within, along with the regeneration. We have an incredible partnership with how various supported. The strategy that ran from 2018 to 2023 was that housing would allocate 30 beds for exclusive groups like families. By the end of 2020, purchased of 3 properties, the aspiration up to 12 beds and achieve that. We'd actually earmarked 24 of those 30 beds 2 years early with just 6 beds short. and we handed back to the fund. So the Headstart having source properties and then manage the compliance of those properties and make sure they're of a good standard and be good enough for my client. They are. We provide basic furniture, blinds, lampshades, Wi-Fi utility license. Make sure that we apply for the council requirements. We have an adequate coverage occupancy rate of 95.56 and we as of writing. Now expect it to be a bit higher. We typically have just 2 rooms available. Those 2 rooms typically are under maintenance. As soon as the person moves out, maintenance move in and turn it around. That compares to commercial hotels pre-COVID target rates of 80%. Really pleased that we can achieve the average. So probably mid last year, we realised that the Headstart housing strategy needed to be updated. Because the young people, in effect, cajoling to move back to the borough because they finished their education, and it suited us to support them with social housing and the back into our very good cases networked up in other areas. So we sort some of the us, and actually that's right. So actually support them, continue to support out the borough. We went back to housing and says if we have half of our property portfolio as council stock and the other half is privately rented from students and negotiate really hard to get the best rates, could we over the next 5 years exchange those private rent? It will support us to be able to do that. Maybe over the next 5 years. There is an exciting project that has including on developing quite neglected sites into single bed units, and they've invited possibility care leavers to have some of those units and to be involved in construction and workstation. So there's real sense of development. We are looking to work with a number of partners that their contracts are due for renewal, but in their corporate social responsibility, they will work with us and invite care leavers to enforce it. And there is a bit more, but questions?
Thank you, Tiffany.
I think it's a really good scheme, and there's lots to welcome. I don't people ask the support.
Oh, so good. Okay. So the Headstart housing is a transitional accommodation that we between 6 and 9 housing. During COVID, we had considerable demand for high level needs. That has pushed our budget overspend by more than. But we're also in the process of issuing an opportunity in relation to a series of that instead. So in effect, what it does is Headstart housing, providing high level needs of purchase price, the number of now have a benchmark to go out to tenants, but those ideas tell us reasons why they can do better, and hopefully
See that coming through. Part of that is.
So I guess where I'm going is, these rumors give me some sustainable.
So when you strip out the height, beds in about 100. That is the half minute.
And some of them are level. But we are managing them. And so we're particular that circumstance. Thank you, yeah, Council Kent said, very good scheme. Does it meet the demand that we have?
Yes.
It is meeting the demand.
Yeah, we work really hard to understand when people are ready. We work really hard to understand that time. Input arrangements, breakdown. Yeah, it's carefully choreographed. It's not easy, but we do it.
Okay, so this is a stepping stone.
Yeah.
Okay, so. So the recommendations are on page 86. Just briefly, last item is the work programme, covers 7 years. Lucy, is there anything to be said about the work programme?
Not really. I'm doing this year as the last meeting of this one. You will know that there is the motions update, some scrutiny recommendations, motions, that been agreed at council after the relevant owners committee. And that's just for committee members to know and their questions. Other than that, no, it's the work programme.
Just to say that we had a briefing note from Inspire. Kate's been there for quite a while waiting. Did anybody have any questions? John, did you get a briefing note from Inspire? No. No questions for you, Kate. Sorry that you have to wait so long to get to that item, but thank you for being there. I hope that it's been of some interest to you in terms of your contribution on the other report. Thank you, everyone. This meeting this evening, and I now declare the meeting closed at 21.
Yeah.
Thank you.